So, welcome to the next Cocoa Heads event. I would like to thank the organizers today, which is Applifting. So please, give a nice round of applause to them. So I see you've already found a beer, you already found a pizza. So I think we are ready to start with the first talk for today. And it's Filip from Applifting, so it's the local guide, and he will tell us some interesting things about Combine.
Thank you, guys. Hey, everyone. Pleasure to meet you, and pleasure to see you here today. I was asked to talk about Combine, and that I will do. So, first, who of you did work with Combine yet? Is there anyone who worked with Combine? Well, I see one person there. Nobody else? Okay, great. So how many of you did work with reactive programming already? Quite a plenty of hands. That's great. So first, I'll do a short intro to reactive programming, and then we can see how it applies to Combine framework, and yeah, that's about it. So first, we have asynchronous operations. That's like a basic cornerstone of programming right now, because most of what we do, we don't do in the foreground, but we do it on the background to don't block the user interface and to enable the user to work with the interface even if the app is processing in the background. And there are like multiple ways how to approach asynchronous operations right now. And those are, for example, callbacks or key value observation, which is like very Apple specific thing. Then we have notifications, notification center, and for example, closures. And so what's reactive programming? Reactive programming is something which is an abstraction for typical asynchronous operations. And the way it works is we have something which is called a publisher. And the publisher is a box which creates events, right? And then we have a subscriber, which is connected to that publisher and is receiving those events. But we still can't really do anything with just like two pieces connected together, and we need to work with what the events are and how does the application work around those events. And that's why we have operators. So this is the basic structure of how it works. So we have different operators. We can, for example, like filter out different signals, different events, or we can map those events to different kinds of events. That sounds really abstract, right? So let's see how it works in real life. This is a generic screen which has one text field and one button, and we see that as the text field is empty, the button is disabled. And how this works is that we have like text field to text, which is what we call the publisher, and it creates events each time user enters the text. And then we have button is enabled, which is the subscriber, which updates in accordance to what goes inside. But in between, we need to do some operations, and like the most basic operations would be like, is there something in text field? More advanced operation would be, for example, is the phone number valid? So this is basically what's reactive programming all about. Congratulations. Now you know how to think in React programming. So what's Combine about? What's Combine? Does everybody know what's Combine? This is Combine. It's a combine harvester, to be exact. And yeah, so Combine has publishers, as I shown you, and publisher is something which creates events and sends them to subscribers. Important thing about publishers in Combine is that they can end the stream and they have two associated types, which is quite important thing. And one of them is value. It's the kind of event that's floating from the publisher, and it has a failure type. And you can choose whether you want to have a failure type, which is, for example, some error, or you can say that it can never fail, and then the failure type would be never, which is a new type which you might be already familiar with. So example here, if we, for example, would download products, then our value would be array of those products, while the failure type would be a download error. If we would have a different publisher, which would be, for example, sorry? While the failure type would be a download error. I think someone's listening to the stream. Oh. the stream was through the speakers, so don't do that, please. Anyway, if we would have a publisher for a text field, which we already seen in the example before, then the associated type for value would be a string, because it sends strings, but it can never fail. It can't tell us like, I failed, the pipe is broken. Another example would be user profile. And user profile can send, again, values, and the values can be optionals, and it might never fail, right? So it's important to think about publishers that have associated types, and there are always two associated types. One for the value and one for the failure. Okay, so what if we take a publisher and connect it to a subscriber? We get something which is called cancelable. And cancelable is one of the most important concepts of Combine. And it's the pipe we create if we put those two together. And the event stream starts not when we create the publisher, not when we create the observer, but when we connect them together. And why is it called cancelable? It's called cancelable because you can explicitly cancel it by calling cancel method. But also, important part is that the cancel is called also when the object is auto-released. So basically, you can use this to manage your memory. What does it mean really in practice is that you still need to keep the reference to the pipe you create, because if you don't keep the reference, the pipe closes immediately. For example, if you would create a new pipe in a new cancelable in view.load, and you wouldn't retain the reference in the instance, it would go out of memory as soon as the view.load would end. Yeah. Right. So how can we make cancelables? So for example, if we have like some publisher, then like the easiest cancelable we can create is just like .assign, and .assign is a subscriber which takes an instance and a type safe path, and then saves the events to that instance. It's pretty easy. And another useful one is sync, and the sync does basically the same thing, but you can really do something with the object you get or the event you get. So for example, this one does stuff with username that's passed into the closure that's given as an argument. So the third and perhaps most important part of reactive programming are the operators. And operators work on the event stream that's passed between the producer and the subscriber. And important thing is that they create new publishers. So if you take publisher and an operator, together they create a new publisher. So they can encapsulate them, and they can be chained and combined. So for example, if you have operator here, you can have two operators, for example. So why is it called combine? Does anyone know? No, because it's reaping, threshing, and winnowing. That's something I learned recently. I didn't expect anyone to know that, and so this is why it's combined, because you have wheat on one side, and then you reap those wheats, then you thresh those wheats, which means basically you just like loosen the seeds, and the winnowing is like getting the seeds out of those long things. And here we have seeds, and the combination of those operators is basically what's happening here. And combination of operators is the most important thing you need to think about when you are thinking about how to create a app using combine. Because this is how many operators there are. And this is not all of them. This is like a reasonable amount of operators. And what Apple says is like, we have this many operators because they are really simple. Each of them is really, really simple. And we don't have like few highly specialized operators that do a lot of stuff. We have a huge amount of operators, and each of them does a really, really small thing. And you need to think about something called composition. And you really need to think about how to create your app in a way that you need to think about how the data flows through the app, how the data changes through the app. And we'll see about that in a second. First, I'll tell you about something more about the operators themselves. So, if you want to process the events in the stream, then we have, for example, map. Map basically does what it says. It takes a stream of events and transfers them to some different event. For example, if we would have a username stream, we'd call this. We would get a, sorry, did I say username stream? I meant user stream. And I would call this, I would get a stream which has usernames. Then we have compact map. Fun thing about operator names is that they are pretty much analogous to operators on arrays. So typically, if we have map, it filters the events and changes them, no, sorry, not filters, but changes the events into some other events. If we have compact map, it changes those events, and if the result of the closure is nil, then it filters those events out. Then we have, for example, filter, which does pretty much what it says. We have prefix, which is, again, something which we would expect on an array, but wouldn't expect on, let's say, event stream. And what it does is it sends only the first 3 events from the stream and then cancels the stream. And then we have debounce. Debounce is an interesting one because it doesn't just work with events, it works with time. It works in a way that if you have fast stream of events, then you don't always want to propagate all of them. Sometimes you just want to propagate the events if nothing happens for a certain period of time. Let's say, for example, if you had a username field, and you wanted each time a user changes the text that's there to send a request and check whether the username is available. So what this operator does is I'll wait until there isn't a change for 0.5 seconds, and then I'll send the event. So it's like really advanced logic, but done in a really, really simple way. This one's my favorite. What this operator does is it's a decoder. It's a decoder in one simple call, and you can use it to, if of course the user profile is JSON decodable, then you can just pass the stream of data into this and get stream of user profiles out of it. So this is really awesome. Then we have something which is called joining of streams. Because sometimes you need to work with multiple streams, not just one stream. You need to like take data from different places around the app and take them together. So for this, we have, for example, zip. What zip does is it takes the event from one place and takes the event from second place and combines them together. if second event comes from this place 2, if second event comes, it waits until all of the other places have a new event and takes them together and sends a new signal. Combine latest is something like zip, but not quite, because what it does is that each time there is a new event on one of the streams it's connected to, it sends a new event with the latest values from all the streams. You'll see about that in a moment. Then we have error handling. Like, error handling is really, really important, and everybody knows about that. Nobody does it. We have assert no failure, which is a beautiful operator. What it does is that you do you remember how we talked about that there are 2 associated values for each stream? That you have like the value and the failure type. What this event does, what this operator does, is that if you take a source of events and then assert no failure, it changes the error type to never. Sadly, if it fails, then it breaks the app, but well. Then we have catch. Catch is more reasonable. Catch allows you to actually do some logic if something fails. Then we have replace error, which is really useful because it gets called when there is an error, and if there is an error, you can replace it with a useful value. For example, 0, something that's reasonable for your app. Or retry. Retry is especially interesting one because it doesn't just work with the downstream, it works also upstream. It forces the source to generate a new event. And then we have some special operators. Special. One of them is flat map. What flat map does is quite interesting, and I'll get back to it in a bit. We have receive. Receive just changes the thread that the operations are going on, which is especially useful when you are doing something in the background and want to switch to the foreground, or vice versa. And there we have a more interesting example. So here we have like some ticker, some segmented control, and 2 input fields, and again a button. And what happens is we have some publishers, the value of the picker, the selector of the gender, the 2 text fields, and we have a subscriber, which is the enableness of the button. And let's talk about the composition again. So how should we make this work? So if we have the hpicker value, then we want to perhaps have a filter there to see if there are perhaps people who are underage for the use of our services. Then, when we have gender selector, we need to use something like compact map because it filters out the nil values. Then we have the male text field, and there's a filter and debounds. I'm not sure what is debounds because it shouldn't be there. There should be just filter, right? And it filters out when the email is not really an email, for example. And right here we have nick text field, which is interesting because we have the filter, which is reasonable to have. For example, we wait until we have at least 3 characters to do additional logic. But then we have the bounds, and we wait half a second when user is not entering anything. And then we use flat map. Why we need to use flat map is because here we call an additional stream which gets us availability of the nick from the server. And this is not something which is linear. We can't really just put a different stream inside a stream because then it will be inside a stream. And what flat map does is wait until this stream finishes, then unwrap the value and pass it inside. So this is like the flat map is a real elegant way how to like put streams inside of your streams. For example, you can think about it as if you have a closure, and inside the closure you call a different closure, then you wouldn't get the result inside of that closure, but you would get it on one level plus. So this is what flatmap does. It unwraps the stream. Then we would use something like combine latest to get like the latest event from all of those. And when we get something, we can decide whether we should enable or disable the button. And this is a scheme which is like really important, because each time you design a screen or design a process with combine, it's really important to think about like not just what it should do, but how the data should flow through the application. Right, so now you know how to use combine as well. Any questions?
I have one.
Sure.
Do you use combine in production?
Not yet. We are using different reactive programming technologies, but we are really looking forward to it. Most of our projects don't support iOS 13 exclusively, so that's the main reason why not. But I think as most of our customers are quite progressive, we'll be forced to use it eventually. Same as Swift UI and the new stuff like that. And I think it will make our lives like much easier. So we are preparing for it right now. And this is one of the reasons why I did have the speak, because, well, I had the same thing for my colleagues here. So,
okay. I have one more question.
Sure.
I have some articles about the combine.
Yeah.
And I see that combine is really fast, even faster than reactive Swift, and also it consumes less memory.
Mm-hmm.
And my question: are you planning in the future maybe rewrite some part of your apps for the using combine or not?
Yeah, I think I can safely assume that we will rewrite part of, or a significant part of our applications to combine. And it's mostly because it's much more legible than the technologies we are currently using. And yeah, the performance also might play a part, but I'm not entirely sure about that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? Sure.
Do you feel combine is, or is there anything missing in combine if you compare it to RX Swift or reactive Swift?
Yeah, I didn't find anything missing already. Maybe the concept of disposed bags works differently, because right now it's auto-managed from ARC. And it's maybe something to like get used to, and not something that's missing. And I really didn't see anything like missing per se. Maybe if there were like some more complicated things, then the compiler might fail, but I'm not entirely sure about that. There was occurrences when my compiler failed with segmentation fault when I was working with RX Swift, but it didn't happen so far with Combine. But I didn't really do like much advanced things. Anyone else? Sure, in the back.
Are there any debugging tools from Apple regarding
Sorry?
this?
Any and debugging tools?
Yeah,
I don't think so. I haven't met any specific debugging tools for this. There are some debugging operators, like operators which are specifically designed for debugging, for example, print. So that says a lot, but no, I don't think so. Sorry, in the total back.
I had a similar question.
Sure.
You ever tried to debug any code using combine, especially code coming from somebody else than you?
No, but I did try to debug a RX Swift, which is terrible and it's nightmare, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. But still, if the code is written properly, then you would know what it does, but still debugging someone else's code is painful. That will never change, and I don't think that Combine changes anything about that. It's just like you have to have the different approach to debugging when you are using reactive programming. And in the back?
My question basically was the same to guys before.
Okay, so is it answered or is it answered or?
Yes, probably yes, but
Okay.
my experience with Redshift was that you use debug mostly because you don't have much choice. You just understand. And is it the same in Combine basically? Is it like you need you limited only on print or you can do something more? Or like is it the same?
I don't think so, but I'll need to check because there were guys in the company who worked much more with RX Swift than me, but I don't think there was any specific tools. So, and any specific tools for Combine as well. Yes, in back.
Actually, two questions. First, how this works in the broader architecture in terms of controllers or the new React kind of programming in all of the views in iOS. So how do you structure a code in Combine so it doesn't end up in let's say one huge pie of producers and consumers?
Right. So most sane place to have the logic, like the operator logic and all the pipes, is to have it in view model if you are using the MVVM design practice. I wouldn't really know where to recommend having it if you are using MVC, because I wouldn't really know what to recommend to you generally. But yeah, I think the view controllers make most sense. Perhaps some controllers if you are using different architecture. Anyone else?
Can you confirm that there is missing the part related to the UI kit? I mean, this is compared to RX Swift. This is equivalent of RX Swift, but it's missing RX Cocoa.
You mean like if there is something like
No
RX Cocoa?
no UI kit publishers.
Like
no, actually there are publishers, and it's quite easy to.
They are?
Yes.
like reactive API UI kit. So
Yeah,
you can go to the next field.
I'm not 100% sure if they were there from the start, but right now, yeah, you can.
I heard that it's missing. If not, it's even better.
I don't think so. Like it's really easy to do, and it's really easy to like add to existing code. Like if you want to create a publisher from variable, then you just like published as a modifier word, and then you can by ampersand reference it as a publisher, and then each time anyone writes.
How do I subscribe to text views or button?
They have each separate publishers. So I think there is a publishers library which has all the publishers for the UI kit, but I'm not 100% sure, and I'll need to check, but I'll get back to you in a few minutes. Anyone else?
So
Yes, sure.
if you were starting the new app today, it was iOS 13 plus, you would use Combine definitely?
That's a great question. I would say yes for some parts of the application, and I'm not entirely sure if I would do all logic in Combine, because I'm still not confident enough that this won't go bad in the way that most all the RX projects went. So I would like to contain it somewhere. Is that all? Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.